part of it is there is definitely a lot of residual Taylorism built into management ranks. And Taylor did a lot of good things, but Taylor's basic philosophy was management does the thinking and the laborers do the doing. And, it's interesting because even as far back as then, other people had other outlooks.
What's up, everybody? This is Paul Critchley, president of New England Lean Consulting. Welcome to another episode of the New England Lean podcast. I'm wicked excited to bring you this episode this week. This is another show that we have two guests on with us. And this one I think is pretty unique because of who our guests are. Now, before I introduce them, I just want to kind of paint a picture for you. If I put you in a conference room with 100 people and I said, figure out who you think knows each other, and kind of pair people up based on just what you think after you talk with everybody, their backgrounds, their experiences. I don't think you would ever put Jonathon and John together. And those are our guests. It's Jonathon Andell and John Thacker. Now, what I mean is their paths to lean and where they are today are so different. And it's so interesting to me that they kind of have come together. Now, they walk us through that, each of their paths in the episode, so I won't spoil it for you. But just to give you a little background, Jonathon is a Lean Six Sigma black belt, and he came up through Motorola back when Six Sigma was kind of just getting started. So he learned that. He got his certification Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt from Alabama. And then along the way, as more and more people were kind of learning about Six Sigma, some folks gave him some books from Shigeo Shingo, which if you listen to the show, I'm pretty sure you know who that is. So he kind of morphed, I'd say, from Six Sigma over to Lean. And to some extent, I'll call that a traditional path, say. Now, John, on the other hand, completely different. John has a BA in liberal arts and an MBA that he earned later. But when he went to college, he actually wrestled in college and had quite a bit of success there. So when he graduated school and came out into the workforce, he tried to apply what made him successful as a wrestler to how he led people and realized pretty quickly that wasn't going to work so well. So that's what kind of drove him to learn more about lean and culture and respect for people. And that's why I say, these two paths are so different, and it's so cool and interesting that they've now come together. It's just kind of amazing to me. So it was really a great conversation. We started off when we talked about their personal lean journeys, like I kind of just mentioned, but we also talked about overcoming personal bias. And that's a big part, I think, of respect for people, understanding that, we're not the experts. The people doing the work are the experts. We also talk a little bit about kind of what we call the Toyota guiding philosophy and Taylorism. We touch on that a little bit and how those two things are kind of diametrically opposed a little bit. So it was really a great conversation. As always, I hope you like it, and I hope you get something out of it. Thanks, everybody. I hope you have a great week. We'll talk to you soon. All right, welcome to the New England Lean podcast. As I mentioned in the intro, we're continuing on with our two guest per episode series. For whatever reason, it just seems to have been going that way lately. So today, I welcome two guests, Jonathon Andell and John Thacker. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
So I always like to start the episode because even though the lean community is, I would say somewhat smallish and tight-knit, not everybody knows everybody. So if you each could maybe hum a few bars about what your backgrounds are like and kind of how you've come into lean and that kind of thing, I think that would be helpful. So Jonathon, maybe we'll start with you.
Okay. So I'm an engineering nerd back in the days when I actually did what my degree said. And 1,000 years ago, I was at Motorola when Bill Smith coined the word Six Sigma, and I got some training, and I became a so-called Six Sigma black belt. And I kind of found my calling, and I've been doing it ever since then. So I've since become a master black belt, and now I'm a Jedi warrior. So but as I was learning Six Sigma, people started showing me books by this dude named Shingo, and I just thought it was all part of Six Sigma before I found out that there's this strange political divide between the two of them, at least sometimes. And so now I just I picked up a lot of different tools. I'm a fairly good user of the problem-solving toolkit, but over the course of years, I found out that it's less about the tools and more about who's able to go do something. And I think that's kind of where we're going to be going here with this. So at this point, I will pass the ball on to John.
Thanks, Jonathan. So a little bit about me. I went to school for software engineering and found out really quickly that it wasn't going to work for me. I'm just too physical, ADHD, whatever you want to call it. So I got out of college as quickly as I could, which was with a liberal arts degree. And it worked really well. So I was working for Walmart with my degree. And really, I was working at this warehouse, and my boss took some interest in me because he had expanded the business and needed a supervisor. And I had background with Walmart and a college degree. So he asked me to lead a team there. And I was able to turn the team around from being in the red to being in the black. He encouraged me to go on and get my Lean Six Sigma belts. We were a Lean Six Sigma company, so they were highly supportive of that, paid for it and everything. So I got my green belt, got my black belt, and he also encouraged me to go on and get my MBA. So I furthered my education there, have spent most of my career in manufacturing supply chain, some on the pre-manufacturing side, some post-manufacturing, as well as some retail supply chain, that sort of thing. So most of the application of Lean and Six Sigma for me has been in the supply chain space, especially warehousing. And for me personally, when I was loading a trailer, my concern was about personal performance, and I was going to be the best, and I was the best, and I got promoted. And I found out really quickly that team performance is different. And so my attention switched to team performance. And from there, evolved pretty quickly to leadership, because I realized the influence leadership had on team performance. And a few years into my rose-colored glasses, I realized that most leadership was highly constrained by the culture of the company the leader worked for. And some people that I might go out and have a beer with and be friends with in a normal context, became Satan in this organization because of policies, processes, and just residual culture that was in place. So my current personal development and focus is really on culture and how we create the construct and the systems that sort of result in the leadership and eventually outcomes that we see.
Nice. So I do want to jump right in there, John. So thank you for bringing it up. In the greatest segue in podcast history, we'll go with it, because culture, and we talk a lot about it on this podcast, honestly, with a lot of our guests, what effect culture has on, if you want to call it, lean transformation success rate, which I personally hate, but we'll go with it. But just as a matter of course, what part culture plays kind of in the whole thing. And I'll join you to say, the longer I've done this, and I've been doing lean, I opened New England Lean in 2012. Before that, my history is, manufacturing engineering for 20 some odd years. So I've kind of been at it for a long time too. And it wasn't up until somewhat recently that it kind of like dawned on me like a 2x4 to the back of the head. It's the culture. It's not the tools. Tools are easy by comparison. Show me how to do a value stream map. Okay, now I know. Yes, and I can talk, chapter and verse about all of the benefits that it gets, but it's the people engagement piece that if you can, right, tap into that, that's when this whole thing kind of explodes. Can you tell me a few bars, John? Maybe, you mentioned you worked your way up through, can you talk a little bit about, how you came to make those same conclusions and kind of like what did you have like an aha moment along the way somewhere?
Yeah, a little bit of both. So there's the continuous growth and evolution that people naturally have. And that's one thing that good lean takes advantage of, actually. And as I tried things and they didn't work, I would learn and I would grow. And I could push myself. And for some background, the reason I went to college where I went was to wrestle. And I had a really great coach, Jim Hazewinkle, Olympic Hall of Fame, and great wrestler. And I had some of that mentality in my personal life to push myself to physical exhaustion to accomplish something great. And I took that into the workplace. And as soon as I became a team leader, I realized that that was not normal and I couldn't treat people the way that I treated myself. And the standards and so on that I had for myself, they work for me because I'm me. But trying to impose that type of rigor or discipline on somebody else is, first of all, unfair. And secondly, far outside the norm. And so I really alienated a lot of my teammates. And, I was the jerk where nothing was ever good enough. And that's how I came across. I like to say that's how I came across because it wasn't my intent, but really that's who I was, because perception is reality for everybody else in the conversation. So that was my first leadership experience. And, I was told really quickly to tone it down. And thankfully I had an operations manager with a high EQ, and he moved me across the building and paired me with a very young, physically strong person that I could relate with. And he was able to model for me more of a servant leadership approach. And it made an impact because he had the physical ability to be rough and tough. He was like a bodybuilder, but instead he chose to behave in an emotionally intelligent way. And in my young mind, I realized this is a choice the guy is making. So great development point there for me, which kind of launched my whole trajectory going forward.
Gotcha. All right. And Jonathan, I'll say same question. How did you, you spoke a little bit about the factions of Six Sigma and Lean, and I will say that I don't take sides in that particular one because here at the firm, we teach both.
Sure.
So I don't pick on, I'm a Lean guy. I'm not a Six Sigma black belt. So I guess on paper, I'm on that side, but I don't, look down on it. Again, we chatted before we hopped on. For me, it's if it works, keep doing it. If it doesn't work, stop doing it. So if you prefer Six Sigma and it works for your organization, then that's cool, right? So how for you, hearing kind of what we've been talking about, what John just said, do you see that whether it's Lean V, Six Sigma, or culture in an organization and having a toxic leader, have you seen that happen? Did you ever have that as an occurrence in your history?
There's a lot of ground in that question. To your last question, yes, I've seen everything from the most toxic imaginable leaders all the way to the most enlightened and effective leaders. And hopefully I've learned more from the effective ones than the toxic ones. My journey was as an engineer. I came out of school thinking that it was my job to swoop in with a red cape and a red S on my chest and go solve everybody else's problems. And once I came up with the right equation and solution, the rest of the world should, bow down in homage to me and believe everything I said. And lo and behold, that wasn't how it worked.
Shocking.
Yeah, shocking.
I made the same mistake.
Yeah. And some of it was, people poked legitimate holes in some of what I was doing because I hadn't thought of everything. And, when you're thinking all by yourself, you don't think of everything. And as it evolved, I started growing a bigger and bigger appreciation for the fact that, having different minds and different outlooks and stuff like that is a way to build to a better consensus. I started working with people who were trying to become, black belts or whatever else you want to call it, who didn't come from engineering backgrounds. And lo and behold, you didn't have to have an engineering degree to know how to solve problems. And it was like, all of these head exploding experiences that I encountered as I went along the way. I did have some pretty big successes at Motorola where I was using some of the Lean and Six Sigma tools. I just happened to be in a situation where designed experiments were something good, and that's not something that everybody can do all the time. Although in the back of my mind, I still had Fisher had designed it and farmers were using it out in their fields. So I was still getting, that little bit of inculcation that, you don't have to be the genius of the ages in order to use a lot of this stuff. And just as the years went on, I just kind of evolved my understanding. Today I've gotten to a point where if you imagine two organizations that basically do the same thing in direct competition with each other, and organization one has a group of 10 really highly trained, technically astute problem solvers like me. Organization two has 100 people who are turned loose to go do stuff. Organization two is going to clean the clock of organization one. And that's, I don't know exactly when that aha moment came to me, but it's become more and more just ridiculously obvious. So what you need is to set your organization up so that the 100 can go do what they do with what they already know. And yeah, layer on a few more skills and build up their, bag of tricks as they go. I'm sure we've all seen a zillion places where somebody wants to invoke a Six Sigma program and they throw a bunch of people in classes and give them a bunch of projects and it sort of looks like something's happened, but not really. I call it the GE model. And then I've seen the organizations where people just get to do what they can do with what they already know. And, I know John has heard me say this, I pontificate that the person who knows the most about digging the ditch is the one holding the shovel. And you just gotta let the person holding the shovel go decide a little bit more about how the ditch should be dug. And the more you can do that and then compare notes with the rest of the team, that's the organization that's really going to start making inroads.
Well, I love that metaphor, Jonathan, because I think it highlights the philosophical difference that maybe doesn't get talked about enough. But I'm going to use a New England metaphor, since it's New England lean.
Careful, you got to say it right.
Yeah, do we have an interpreter here? Oh.
Can the Patriot Way work without Tom Brady?
Not this season,
No.
apparently.
Yeah, right. Now, I wasn't trying to start any wars.
That's okay.
But the answer is yes and no, right? The reason that it's no is that the Patriot Way was developed over time with Tom Brady as an integral component. And it represents true lean, which is to say, if you go back and you look at the methods of Toyota, for example, they had a guiding philosophy that determined how they treated and included their employees, and tools that we currently use in the lean community developed out of that philosophy. And what you have is today is you have companies that sort of fail to grasp that, and they start with the tool set. And that's like trying to copy the Patriot Way somewhere else without the development over 2 decades or however long it took to continuously develop this team together. So I like the metaphor of a handful of experts versus everybody, because it really touches at the root of, I think, what lean really truly is versus how it's sort of applied sometimes.
I like that analogy because, you know, maybe where the Patriots goofed was they didn't make the process robust against non-Tom Brady situations.
Yeah.
And, you know, obviously, you know, the analogy breaks down when you got the fact that love him or hate him, he's an amazing, brilliant quarterback on the field. He can see things like nobody else can. You know, that's not something you can replace. Where lean comes in is you don't need somebody who's that level of a genius. What you need is everybody in the trenches doing their little bit along the way. But I do like that as a way of describing it.
And there's been, trust me when I tell you. No, Jonathan, I know you're in New Jersey. John, I'm not sure. Where are you?
Hanover, Pennsylvania.
Okay. All right. So
Mid-Atlantic.
Gotcha. Duly noted. So just trust me when I tell you, there has been plenty in the news in New England, both since when Tom Brady decided to leave, and now since that he's won the Super Bowl with Gronk, and you know, there's been all kinds of analysis being done. So I listened to some of that because I'll admit, I mean, I'm a Pats fan. I grew up, you know, in the 80s when they sucked. So I feel like I've earned it a little bit, but we've gotten spoiled. I mean, to have, you know, that, I mean, let's face facts. I mean, it was the AFC East was a lock forever. You know, we basically knew we were going to make the playoffs no matter what, but so there's been lots of, and it's a lot of those types of discussions, which is, well, you know, everybody thought Belichick was a great coach and he had these things figured out, but now it's like, well, wait a minute, you just finished 7-9 and the guy you let go just won the Super Bowl. So maybe we didn't have it all figured out. So there, you know, and that'll be, you know, the next time I have you guys on, we could just talk football. Maybe I'll start a new podcast and we could just talk about that.
You want to be careful because I'm a miserable Browns fan. So, you know,
well, your guys,
it's been decades since we've had a season like we did this last couple of years. So
you're right. Well, hey, you're also talking to a Sox fan, so trust me when I tell you I know how heartache is all about.
Yeah.
So can you guys talk to me a little bit, because you know, this is, again, it's a topic that we talk about on the podcast, and I do it for a very good reason, because it's that important. You both chatted a little bit about the ability to engage more people in the organization, give them more freedom to actually do what you hired them to do, right? Go figure. How do you coach that? How do you guys help organizations? Because what I see is a lot, that's one of those hefty speed bumps that, you know, people will call us and they'll say, you know, our on-time delivery is no good, or, you know, I can see the flow over here could be better. But when we get to that point, it's where I, we'll say things like, well, you got to let Jonathan, he know, and I say the same thing, which is the people who do the work know the best. They are the experts. It's up to us as lean practitioners to pull that information out of them, because they know it, but they don't always know they know it. So when I talk to owners and CEOs and general managers, when we have those conversations, some of them get it and they're on board, and some of them are like, whoa, are you trying to tell me that you want me to let everybody out here just basically do what they want? Because I'm not sure I'm in on that. So talk to me a little bit about that, because I feel like a lot of people could relate, because I think a lot of people struggle with that same thing.
I think, part of it is there is definitely a lot of residual Taylorism built into management ranks. And Taylor did a lot of good things, but Taylor's basic philosophy was management does the thinking and the laborers do the doing. And, it's interesting because even as far back as then, other people had other outlooks. I'm going to go on a weird tangent here. There was a French playwright named Beaumarchais, and two of his three books in a trilogy have actually been made into operas. There's The Barber of Seville and The Marriage of Figaro have both been made into operas. And a lot of this Figaro character, who's kind of like the central thing, is Beaumarchais' way of saying, the average person on the street has to show more resourcefulness and more intelligence just to get through a difficult time than the people who are way up and privileged. In Beaumarchais' time, it would be the nobility. In our time, it would be the executives. But that wisdom isn't like, it's not like the folks at Toyota invented something that wasn't around for centuries. They just tapped into it. The whole issue, though, of overcoming set in their ways stuff is a challenge. I remember being at a plastics company where the general manager had worked his way up from the ranks. So he used to be unloading plastics parts from the machines as they were shot. But by the time he got into the ranks, he had fully bought into the Taylor outlook. I'm not going to let the inmates run the asylum. Direct quote. So I don't know the easy answer to get a person like that on board. There may be some folks that are just hopeless. In terms of what have I seen that has occasionally worked, the two things that have been most effective for me are listening to the folks out on the floor. If they come up with a suggestion that takes a little bit more authority to implement, go ahead and implement it and give them credit. It's not a guarantee and it's not a panacea, but it's a place to get a foot in the door. And it's a place where you can start getting the folks in management to see, hey, we had an improvement happen, and the folks on the bottom to say, yeah, and I was the reason that improvement happened, and start bringing them together. The other alternative is when you have a real high up leader like a Toyota who just mandates it. But those are just some general observations. John, I guess I'm gonna hand off to you and let you run with it for a bit now.
Yeah, so when I consult with companies on this topic, the first thing I do is I try to get as high in the company as I can. And it's rare that a board of directors will hire a consultant. Certainly not, somebody like me. I don't have the name cachet for that. But directors, right. But director level or something like that. Hey, we have this problem. Can you help us? Or we have a mandate to be lean. We don't know what this is. Can you help us out? Type of thing. But the reason I try to go as high as I can is that the conversation always starts with culture, and I need to know from them what the constraints, strictures, et cetera, are on the company in order to help them develop effectively and efficiently. And sometimes the outcomes of a process or system are unintentionally negative and will have a significant constraint on how things are done. And I'll give you a real life example. I worked for one company where the site did not have HR representation, but the corporation had an HR phone number you could call in a different state with different people. So we all know the people we work with, and this person immediately raises the alarm on everything and you have to talk them off the ledge, whereas this person won't say anything until something is a severe problem, and when they talk you listen immediately. Of course, somebody that's not involved in the team doesn't know those personalities and dynamics. And so the negative consequences for this very large company is there were several sites that were severely affected in their ability to serve the customer, generate revenue, et cetera, because people called that line with unfounded accusations, essentially, about different folks.
Wow.
Because they didn't have an outlet for communication or sharing. So they took advantage of what they had. And frankly, some of the stuff that was shared was intentionally negative. I don't like this person, so I'm going to, lie about them. And that, triggered an official policy with certain people and committees involved and so on and so forth. And just a complete disaster, because this particular policy hadn't been really tested, R&D, T&E, all of that. Although, frankly, I think anybody should have been able to see that this was a bad idea.
Yeah, it certainly sounds it.
Yeah.
Right. And I've worked at companies like that too. You have the HR hotline.
Yeah.
Do you ever have any problem, and
My door is always open.
right, except when it's not.
Yeah.
Except when you can't get through.
No, nobody inside the door, but it's open.
Right. Leave a message. We'll get. Yeah. It's you always. Yeah. And
So policies, the way that people interface with each other within the company, especially higher up in the company, I call that culture. But I'm going to really be a little philosophical and move over to the soft side a little bit here. In order to effectively run your business and improve continuously does require people to change at a certain pace. And the most effective way to sustain that is to actually care about your people. If you love people, this is easier. Now, you can't outwork a bad system. If you're in a bad system, it doesn't matter how awesome of a person you are, you'll still fail. Mm-hmm. But all things being equal, leaders that actually care about people and want them to see success typically can sustain and lead change. And once you've established what really matters to you, so I've been the guy, and I've definitely worked for the guy that wanted personal success. I wanted the team to change so that I could tell people we did this awesome thing. Look what we did. And I was the leader, by the way. Look at what I did. Right? Thankfully, that was early in my career, and I learned from it, and I'm a different person, but that's still out there. But once you've sort of dealt with that level of personal development, there's still the emotional intelligence side, which is how you relate to people regardless of how you feel towards them. And I'll give you a really common example. Somebody has an improvement idea. Is the response, yeah, we already tried that. Don't waste my time, right? That's what I'm sort of implying with that. Or, have you thought about this? Well, what about this? How about if we did it this way? that's a great place to start, but my ideas are way better. So let me tell you how we should really do it, type of thing, right? And that can be challenging for some personalities. And I think I fall into that category because I love a puzzle. I love a challenge. I love to think. And when somebody sort of flips that switch in my mind and I start thinking about something, it just all tumbles out. If I don't have sort of the executive presence to shut the hell up and let this be the other person's time, right? And depending on the level of the org you're working at, changes the way that you approach. So I've coached leaders that are used to talking to other leaders, and they'll get in a conference room and, you know, they'll make jokes and they'll tell each other, man, that's a really stupid idea. But there's a level of trust there, and also they're all equals. But that same executive will go one step down in the org and talk the same way, and that's very disconcerting to that level of the organization. So the emotional intelligence side is built on the foundation of where your sort of heart is at, what your value, because if your values are wrong, you can sort of put on a mask, you know, the how to win friends and influence people. We know people like that. I think we all know people that are self-centered, sometimes even vicious and vile, but they have all of the politeness down, right? They know how to manipulate people and get their way. That doesn't work either. That's not sustainable. People see right through that, right?
I've
So,
worked for those guys, by the way.
Yeah,
I can give you their names when we're done.
Yeah.
You can look them
Yeah,
up.
I'm guessing all of us probably have a pretty large list of folks like that.
And how sad is that, though? Because John, to your point, it's like, why? And Jonathan, you too. You know, you brought up Frederick Winslow Taylor, and why? You know, sometimes I'll sit here in the office, or I'll be mowing my lawn, or driving to a client, and I get a little philosophical as well, and I think, why is it this way? Why? And you know, I've worked for small companies, I've worked for ginormous companies. It you know, it seems to follow the trend where the bigger the company, maybe the little bit worse it is, but that's not to say it doesn't exist everywhere. And I guess I don't know what the right answer is. But I guess what I do know is that if we're talking lean and how to get it to sustain, you can't do it either of those two ways, John, that you just laid out, right? If I'm a, you know, totalitarian on the authority, I'm the smartest guy in the room, what I say goes, you never in a million years am I going to get everybody on my shop floor excited about lean because I said this, that you have to. It just doesn't, right? It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I saw a fascinating poll or question on LinkedIn where somebody asked, you know, should somebody have to cost justify air conditioning in the office? And the responses were very interesting to that. And the point he was making was you can't cost justify air conditioning in your office. You can justify it, but you can't cost justify it. It's done for the employees. And in the same way, in my experience, if you want lean to work, the continuous improvement mindset and improving things has to include the things that the employees care about. I've had employees ask for another microwave, you know, locker size, just random things that matter to the employee a lot that we definitely can't cost justify and really isn't part of a process. You know, I can't go to my boss and say, hey, we changed out all these lockers and made them bigger because, you know, we have people with large feet and their size 13 steel toes they're required to wear don't fit in the lockers, right? I can't do that. But what I can do is change the lockers out because I'm serving the employees. I'm improving their quality of life at work. And it's part of the psychology of human relationships where you can't take all the time. You just can't. And I'm not saying that relationships are always or should be transactional, but it's the way that we think. if I'm always asking you to give more for the company, and I'm not meeting your wants, then we can't have a relationship where we continuously get better.
And I've seen that.
Don't
Sorry,
trust
Jonathan. Go ahead.
I'm saying if the employees don't trust management, then chances are it's going to be a two-way street. We're on Zoom as you're recording this on Zoom, right?
Yep.
Would it be okay if I shared my screen or something I have?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
Hang on a second. I think I have to allow you.
Okay, go ahead and allow. I've got something that I recently posted that kind of speaks to John's thing. Tell me when.
All right, you're good to go.
Okay, so here we go. So this is something that I kind of put together. So if you start at the top as your primary priorities and then work your way down, you will get the increased throughput and the reduced costs. But if you start at the reduced costs, you have no idea how that is going to ripple out and what kind of problems you're going to get. And yeah, like to John's point, protecting the customer or the patient, addressing employee fatigue, you'll never be able to put a cost justification on that for the bean counters. But if you're not handling that stuff, you're making a monster mistake. And so, I think that probably more than anything is part of the culture, is that the employees have to feel like, you care about them and you're going to take it, it's going to benefit them as much as anything else. I guess the what's in it for me is a really important part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So
thank you, Jonathan, for sharing that. That's a first in the podcast history. So that's cool. Look at that.
I'll send you the invoice. No problem.
I think the point, Jonathan, I think that builds trust, because when we're doing lean,
it's all trust.
We tell the employees, we're not going to fire people when we get more efficient. This is good for you. It's not just good for the business, right? Lean does not mean less employees are needed. All of this stuff that we deal with. And so the employees are going to test that. And they'll come up and say, okay, fine. Well, you really care about us. We want a bigger TV in the break room. That's a true story that happened in my career, right? So what do you do about that? Well, if you say no, what you're signaling is, I'm telling you that we care about you and that all of this stuff is important. But unless the company is seeing a benefit, then we're just not going to do it. And
the hips are not moving in the same direction.
Yes. And the employees will reciprocate. Okay, fine. Then I'm only going to do stuff that benefits me, right?
Yep. And that's when it all kind of, right. And John, you said it before I could. It all comes down. That's when you talk about respect for people, at least to me, when I talk about respect, it has to be based on trust. And any relationship, which truly that's what it is, has to be based again on trust. One of the things I talk about in our workshops a lot is the fact that we spend more hours with our coworkers Monday through Friday than we do anybody else, right? When you factor in time to sleep. So for the, vast majority out of the week, you're not spending it with the people who mean the most to you necessarily, your family, your kids, right? So it's your coworkers. So you have to both of your points, take those steps to say, we're all in this together. For lack of a better term, we're a team, or a family, if you want to call it that. I know some people have a little bit of an issue there, but one way, whatever you want to call it, we're all in this together. So we all have to be pulling together, and it is a fine line sometimes. So I know that, because I've had instances like that too, John, where people say, it wasn't a bigger TV. I forget. It was, something. So, we want this. Oh, actually, I remember I had an employee once ask if we could install a sauna outside. And I'm like, no. Can the answer be no? And we didn't do it. But that was their rebuttal. They were like, well, I thought you said, because I had brought lean to this company, and they're like, well, you said that, I'm like, yeah, I know, but
can I commute to work on a Maserati?
Yeah, well, it was like, so sometimes those are, because folks like us will say things like that and use those as an example, right? But again, and you're absolutely right. But there is a point at, you have to say, well, listen, there is a limit. But I will say, in those cases, if you have a relationship that is good and is based on mutual trust and respect, then you can say no, and it's okay. It doesn't get into that, tit for tat. You're not going to do this, so I'm not going to do that kind of a thing. So that stuff, absolutely 100%, it has to come first.
Yeah, and a lot of that can possibly be handled with, a little bit of asking why a few times. Why do you think you need that? What are you looking for?
Mm-hmm.
You might be able to come up with something that meets a little of the need for a lot less. And the other extreme, as long as you were talking about building trust, I've got a doozy of a destroying trust example, working for a big corporate entity whose name shall remain nameless. And they were doing Lean and Six Sigma. And when I first got working with them, they would do projects that would just increase customer satisfaction because that was the right thing to do. And they knew that, somehow, somewhere it was going to come by. As management evolved and things changed, they actually came to their people and said, okay, when you travel, your $50 per diem for meals, which hadn't changed from about 5 years and was now probably, only about 2/3 of what it had been in terms of spending money. Now, if your hotel gives you a free meal, we're going to whack $10 off it. And if they serve lunch in the middle of the meeting, we're going to whack this off of it. And they basically communicated to the employee that, we're really not interested in you having a good travel experience. We're interested in saving a few pennies for ourselves. You can imagine that one did not fly too well because some of the people who were affected by it were actually a little bit high up in the ladder. But just the fact that they would even think of doing something like that, at that point, anything they say about we care about all of our employees is like, yeah, right.
Yeah, it falls flat, right? So
Yeah.
guys, sorry, go ahead, John.
Well, I think that, going back to the sauna, for example, when you're trying to change a culture and improve a business or maybe implement lean, you're going to have some initial skepticism from the employees. And particularly if they have been treated in a sort of adversative manner, or us versus them, they're going to try to immediately test. And there's going to be a lot of gotcha moments. And leadership has to be prepared for that. But it's okay to call it out in the right way. Well, so can we get a helicopter pad on site? Something ridiculous. And the employee's trying to make a point, right? And it's okay to respond with, okay, you got me. Yes, there's limits. We're going to use some common sense here. But, if you have something that really could make your job easier and your life easier, let's talk about it because we can solve it together, type of deal. So, being able to recognize ahead of time when you're trying to change the ship and people have been used to being treated a certain way, they're absolutely going to test you. You should know that up front and be prepared to deal with them as a human, not as a small child. You don't have to be sincere about everything. If somebody's being insincere, you can treat it that way. That's okay. That's how humans talk to each other, right? So when somebody asks you for the executive suite, you don't have to say, well, I don't think that that's going to work with the budget currently, but we'll see what we can do. No, you call it for what it is. Okay, I get what you're doing and I understand why you're doing it. Ha ha, joke's on me, very funny. Let's move on.
Right. So guys, I do like to take a little bit of a break from the formal, if you want to call it that, section of the podcast and play a little game I call the Wicked Fun Part. If you're up for it.
Let's do it.
Wicked fun.
Yeah, it's wicked fun, man. All right. So I just have some kind of rapid fire questions. I'll leave it up to you guys. If one plucks your string, feel free, jump right in. You can answer it, and I'll start throwing them out to you. How about this one? What was the funniest thing that's happened to you recently?
I just saw a really funny post on LinkedIn about two executives going to hell. And I don't know if you want me to share that. It was just a pretty funny joke.
If it's G-rated, fire away.
I'll have to say it's PG rated, but
That's fine. We can go there. Yeah.
Okay. So the two executives were at the gates of hell, and the devil said, "All right, you can go to traditional hell, or you can go to TPS hell." And he said, "Well, what's the difference?" He said, "Well, in traditional hell, every day you have to eat 2 shovels full of manure. In the TPS hell, no, I got it backwards. In the traditional hell, you eat 1 shovel full of, shoot, I'm really botching this. Traditional hell, 2 shovels. TPS hell, 1 shovel. All right, I'm back on track here. And so the one executive chooses the one, and the other executive chooses the other. And after some time, they somehow meet up. And the TPS executive says, "Well, how are you enjoying your time with eating 2 shovels of manure every day?" And the traditional executive says, "Well, actually, it's not nearly as bad as they thought, because almost half the time they're out of manure, and the other half of the time they can't find the shovels."
I might have to steal that. I hadn't seen that one. So
yeah, it's somewhere on I reposted it somewhere on LinkedIn. So that one just hit me this morning. I like that one.
That is pretty good. How about this one? What's one thing nobody knows about you?
One time when I was learning how to drive and I was 16, I drove for about a mile with my eyes closed because I wanted to see if the force was real.
Well, all right then. Not advisable. Kids, don't try this at home.
I'll try this at home. Wow.
Well, I did ask the question. What's your favorite word?
Pumpernickel.
How about your least favorite word?
Can't.
Well done. What quality do you admire most in others?
I think for me, empathy.
I think I'd have to go with, I don't know what the right word is, uprightness or integrity, but people who really live in accordance with what they speak and believe.
Authenticity. Can I put that word in your mouth?
Sure. Yeah. I hate that buzzword, but it actually goes here.
I know it's one of those things where it's like, I always like that word, and now it's like everybody starts using it, and it kind of takes on a little different context. So, gentlemen, we only have a few minutes left, so I just wanted to throw it out to you and say, if there's anything that you wanted to talk about or bring up that you think the listenership might get something from that I didn't get a chance to ask you or that we didn't cover, now's your opportunity.
Well, I guess on my end, to just sort of wrap it up and put a bow on it, the challenge for contemporary companies that are trying to implement Lean and Six Sigma is coming to terms with the fact that you are behind the competition and you cannot use a bunch of tools and implement a bunch of rules to get where you're going. You have to adopt a philosophy that puts the employees first and listens to them and implements solutions and then coaches them from where they're at. And you can catch up pretty rapidly. But if you try to go from neutral to fifth gear, you're going to stall out every time.
Nice. I like that analogy, John.
I would build on that with, if you try to imitate the external trappings without really putting in the substance of how do you work with the people, you'll get a few benefits. Things will happen, but it's not going to be the same. Interestingly, I was working with a company where actually they allowed me to take training in the Shingo management methods, which is, very much based on lead with humility and respect people and stuff like that. But at the same time, they were rolling out playbooks that were going to be dealt with in the executive boardroom. And it's like, I think we're missing something here, And I think getting people to really understand that you gotta completely rethink how you work with your people before you can go implement any of the rest of the stuff, or you're just going to get the same old, a couple of superficial benefits, and someone who does it right is going to clean your clock.
Mm-hmm. Nice. So if people want to get in touch with you guys, LinkedIn, is that the best place? You like Twitter?
Works for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on LinkedIn only for social platforms, or tbhlogistics.com.
Okay. And I'll link out to your profiles, your website. Now, do you guys have a book coming out or anything like that you want me to highlight?
Are we allowed to talk about that?
Well, we've been bantering around the idea of maybe doing one, but we haven't even got an outline yet. So we'll have to see if it happens, but it's possible.
All right. Well, tell you what, if and when, I'll say when you guys get it done, let me know. We'll have you come back on. You can talk about it.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you, Paul.
All right, gentlemen, I will let you go. Thank you so much for joining us. I know I got a lot out of it. I'm sure everybody listening did as well.
I'll be interested in tuning in and finding out what I said.
That's always the interesting part. When I listen back, I'm like, I don't remember saying that part, but I guess I did.
Yeah, wait till the editing's done.
Yeah, exactly.
There we go.
All right, guys. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Paul.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Hey, everybody. It's Paul. Before I let you go, I just wanted to say thanks again for listening. You've really made doing this podcast a very rewarding experience for me. I get a lot of messages from listeners. Everyone has something nice to say, which I very much appreciate. Of course, I'm always open to feedback on ways we can make it better. I mean, that's Kaizen, after all. And by no stretch do I claim to have got this all figured out. So if there's things that I could do better, please, by all means, feel free to reach out and let me know. And likewise, if there's somebody that you think would be a great guest, also let me know. There's a chance I don't know who those folks are. So if somebody that you can help put us in touch with, somebody you want to learn more about, certainly let me know and I'll reach out to those folks. But I hope you find the podcast fun, and entertaining, educational, and maybe even a little inspirational, I hope. That's really what I'm going after with this whole thing. So thanks again. And one small ask, if you don't mind, if you listen, whatever your preferred platform is, if you could just, subscribe, give us 5 stars on Apple or whatever, again, whatever platform you listen to, it helps. The algorithms like it. So if you could do that for me, I would greatly appreciate it. And we'll talk to you real soon. Thanks, everybody.